Good evening. These are the stories making the headlines in the Hot 790 News. A child advocate praises the police for actions in an alleged molestation case but says lawmakers have allowed the situation to fester for years. A call for more advocacy for the protection of young boys and men who fall victim to abuse. And Labour Minister Stephenson King urges Wasco employees to work for their pay following a 15.2% increase in addition to an $800,000 sum. We have the details of these stories and more coming up.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News with Lovelace and Amy Joseph.
It is Wednesday, the 21st of November 2018. Welcome to the Hot 7 Nightly News. I am Lovely St. Amy Joseph. Thank you for joining us. We must all collectively do better to protect children. That is the point that Advocate Catherine Seelys wants to drive home in light of news of a newly discovered and still unfolding allegation of child sexual abuse. But she says the government cannot bury its head in the sand on this issue and says society must demand more from its policymakers to ensure the protection of children. News of a prominent man being taken into police custody for alleged abuse of a minor has rocked the country. But one social advocate is not surprised. She says this situation and many others like it are a result of inaction by the lawmakers, those who have the power to ensure that predators face the full brunt of the law. Seelys says when it comes to the fight against child abuse, all hands must be on deck. She has commended police for their part in apprehending the alleged suspect. But as it relates to policymakers, Seelys says their action has been woefully inadequate.
There are over 4,000 sexual assaults and other complaints from the Ministry of Education and the school councillors to the Department of Human Services. You have nobody doing anything about them. So the situation has been bad for a very long time. However, we must say thank God for this, that this was reported and whatever had to be done has been done by the police. It remains in the hands of the justice system to ensure that justice is served. But apart from that, we must remember that legislation and arresting one individual will not solve the problem. It has to be more than that. And the government has to go back to the drawing board and determine how best or better they can protect children.
Seelys has and continues to question the commitment of the government to combating child abuse. Seelys says there is need for the government to do some restructuring and investigation of its own institutions to ensure that they are adequately armed for the fight against child abuse.
The government of St. Lucia has done a terrible job when it comes to violence against women and children. They don't have the necessary structures in place. And those institutions they have, you have the children's home, you have the boys training center, you have the Department of Human Services, the Family Court. These are not properly financed. They don't have the necessary human capacity. The systems, the process, the procedures they use to rehabilitate and to provide care and protection for these children is called into question at every given time. There are allegations of sexual abuse of children at the Boys Training Center and at the Children's Home that is not being investigated by the government.
Seelys says it's now up to the judiciary to ensure that there is justice in this matter. But beyond that, she says, every individual needs to do some introspection and ensure that they are part of the solution to child abuse and not part of the problem. Meanwhile, Bennett Charles of United and Strong is calling for more advocacy for the protection of young boys and men who fall victim to abuse. Charles's statement was issued in reaction to the alleged molestation of a minor. Rochelle Gonzalez reports.
The Communications and Advocacy Officer of United and Strong, Bennett Charles, has spoken his mind about a troubling news report which surfaced over the weekend. The sensitive news surrounds the arrest of a former educator who has been charged with the crime of buggery. The accused was arrested after allegedly sexually assaulting a 6-year-old boy. Charles said this incident, as well as others like it, raises a sense of anger within the organization. On the other hand, he went on to say that the incident highlights the sad fact that female issues are given precedence over that of males.
We understand that men are prone to a lot of things, violence and also sexual abuse. But we've been so caught up in focusing on the issues that women have faced because, again, we see women as, sadly, the weaker sex. we see women as the softer gender, or feminine as the softer gender. And so what that does, it has sort of allowed us to not focus on other issues, the other gender. You know, our men are being sexually abused. Our men are more prone to violence. And so we believe that, you know, if a man is sexually abused, even as a child, it's not an issue that we take on because we're so focused on protecting our girls. But our young boys are being exposed to those very situations.
Charles said the victims of such crimes have a lot working against them, including societal ignorance of the full-scale issue and the lack of resources to deal with it.
We have a culture of even blaming the victims or ridiculing the victims. When you have a child at 5 years who's been sexually abused and molested, do we have the appropriate structures to now facilitate a healthy growth of that young boy into society? And sadly, I don't think we do, because working with members both from the LGBT community and working with women who are not from the LGBT community, it proves that the system may have been trying. I mean, we do have structures like Gender Relations, Human Services, but everybody sings the same songs, that the resources are very limited.
Another thing which is often overlooked, according to Charles, is the after effect of such crimes in both the victims and the perpetrators.
Sadly, it usually is a very long and difficult road for victims of sexual abuse and victims of violence. And even on the flip side, even the person who allegedly committed the crime, society never lets you forget any crime that you commit. But also, as a civilized society, you need to give support to perpetrators. Simply being because if the structures of society, we have a sort of philosophy that the crime is an alleged crime, and the due process must take place. And when the due process takes place and you're proven guilty, then there is something you have to do the time. If you're not proven guilty, then also there are structures in place. And no matter what, we also need to provide support because, you know, again, the perpetrator also has a family. And that in itself becomes an even deeper issue.
The advocacy officer said these are the matters in need of the most attention from policymakers as opposed to them shying away from the topic. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
One man is calling for politicians to put their pens to the paper and give men more legal custodianship of their children. Timothy James is calling on elected members of parliament to change the legislation regarding children and their lawful guardians as a means of reducing the scourge of paternal absenteeism in society. Nisha Charles has more in this report.
Former member of the United Workers' Party and activist Timothy James is asking the powers that be to step up and change the legislation which governs the custody of children. According to James, currently the mother is the legal custodian of the child, and this hinders fathers from taking a more active role in a child's life. James believes that unless the laws are changed to allow fathers more ownership of their children, paternal absenteeism will continue to be the dominant feature in St. Lucian society.
As far as the legislation is concerned, when a man picks up his child and he takes a walk, he's doing the mother a favor. It is the property. Child, if you don't know, child is property of the mother, defined by law, the exact language, defined as property. So until those who want to talk about it, priests, members of men's organization, all of them put pressure on the politicians to change the legislation, recognize men equally, then perhaps we may make a difference. You know the amount of these kids who were in homes where no father, but then the father was trying and perhaps obstructed by the legislation. Rochelle, you know me, I was almost in that situation. What I'm telling you, I mean, now me and my daughter mother have a fabulous relationship. I see my daughter and so on. But I was driven to the point where I was contemplating what could I do to get custody of my daughter. And persons much older than me was advising me, boy, just give up, that's your child. She will know you her father.
He's calling on the politicians to refrain from attempting to manage society on their own, but to follow the proper channels and make their positions clear about various issues, including custody of children, by amending the legislation.
Let these men in this green building realize that they are legislators. They were put there to amend, augment, change, and introduce legislation, not co-manage society.
James made the comments on Tuesday, which was celebrated worldwide as Universal Children's Day. For the Hot 7 News, Nisha Charles reporting.
Thank you very much, Nisha. Minister for Labour Stephenson King has given his thoughts on the news of the results of an unprecedented wage increase between the CSA and WASCO. King says he hopes that the utility company has its house in order if they are to avoid strike action later on down the pipeline. Rochelle Gonzalez reports.
Following the news of an unprecedented move to award workers of the water and sewage company WASCO with salary increases of 15.2%, the island's Labour Minister has expressed hopes that the company has its affairs in order before such payments are made. In a press release from the St. Lucia Civil Service Association (CSA), the successful conclusion of negotiations was announced that workers would receive payment for 2 trienniums covering the period of January 1, 2013 to December 31, 2018. In addition, WASCO has agreed to pay the sum of $800,000 to members of the bargaining unit. On Wednesday morning, King said although this matter does not fall under his jurisdiction, he is hoping that there will be no repeat of the matter of civil action which was taken the last time such a high increase was granted to civil workers under his administration.
I would hope that WASCO has taken into consideration its own fiscal situation, considering the fact that at this time they are engaged in a major project to the dam, and there's aging infrastructure. If you notice, one of the challenges we have at the Ministry of Infrastructure is the frequent disruption of the roads to repair damaged lines. And the reason you have that is because the water infrastructure is certainly aging. And I do hope that all of those elements have been taken into consideration in terms of reinstating or renewing the grid, the question of their own fiscal situation and the projections moving forward. And I hope that that has been taken care of and that it will not result in any unnecessary or undue strikes or industrial action.
The collective bargaining agreement was signed by both parties on Friday, November 16, 2018, in the presence of the Labour Commissioner. The National Utilities Regulatory Commission, NURC, is the body responsible for rate reviews in this matter, and the WASCO board and the unions are the bodies who engage in negotiations. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Rochelle Gonzalez.
This is the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Still to come, Labour Minister Stephenson King says the demolition of the Castries Comprehensive Secondary School is not a priority for the government at present, and St. Lucians look to gain a greater piece of the seasonal farm workers' pie. Stay with us.